Welcome to another Mavens of Manufacturing episode. We have a really exciting guest today. Her name is Clarice, and she is an original Rosie the Riveter. Clarice, thank you for joining us today. And I was just wondering if we could start off with a brief introduction of yourself. So can you let us know who you are and what year you started in manufacturing during the war and what it was that you did during that time?
Well, my name is Clarice Lafreniere, and I started working in the shipyards in Portland at the beginning of, right after the war began. And I was a welder at the shipyards and also what they call a burner. And I joined my husband out on the graveyard shift working at the Kaiser Shipyard. And we worked the nights through from 8 till 12. From 12 to 8 in the morning. I'm going backwards. And he worked at a different area that I was in. And we were on what we call bays. It was in a large warehouse type building. And we were welding the steel for the bunkers that went in the ships, the Liberty ships. And when I was burning, while I was cutting this steel to size that was needed, very few men were there. And the men that were there were the bosses. Of course, women were the first time we had worked out in that type of work. When I was welding, I wore leather overalls and heavy shoes and a helmet with a glass face in it. When I was burning, I did not need the helmet. We worked through the holidays and all. My mother took care of our 2 children. And I worked until through the war, when we were all dismissed as the war ended, thank goodness. And Rosie the Riveter was a very common sign that you would see all around Portland. So women were recruited right away after the war started because the men were all going out. After the war, I worked at different jobs, stayed home mostly. Finally ended up at the Department of Motor Vehicles as a driver examiner, which we were allowed to do once the men decided women were able to do such a thing. At that time, we were allowed to wear pants instead of skirts. So we broke a new era there. And I worked there for 20 years. Ended up being a manager of a field office and retired at 63.
So before the war, can you explain what life was like for you? Did you have a job then, or were you a stay-at-home mom? What was it like, and was engineering something that you considered before as a career, or was that just something that came up when the war started?
Well, I was just out of school in Colorado, and I met my husband, and we were married and moved to Oregon just before the war started. In fact, my daughter was born the night before. Oh, wow. The night after, excuse me. And I had no training as far as anything such as anything actually, because I just got out of school. And I had hoped to be a nurse, but that was not to be.
So when you did start welding, you said that you had no training. How was it like then coming into manufacturing without training? What was that process like?
Well, it really wasn't very difficult. I don't know, there was such a nice group we were working with. I had very little training. We just handed us the rods and turned the machine on and said, go to it. So we learned the hard way.
So when the war was done, were you disappointed that you got dismissed from welding and had to figure something else out?
Not really, because I was ready to stay home with my kids for a while.
What was something that you really enjoyed during that time while you were welding on the big shipyards?
Well, of course, I enjoyed the companionship of the different ones. We met people from all over, actually mostly from the South, Texas and Carolinas and there. And it was, we became quite friends, and they stayed at our house for a while. And we had a lot of parties and friends that way. But I didn't miss welding because it was, I don't know, it was just a job.
So during that time, was there any sort of challenge as a woman in welding that you faced, or was it just a day's work?
Well, I think you felt kind of like you were helping out in the war, but other than that, we just were more, it was more fellowship with the workers.
So did you pick up any skills from that opportunity and apply them later on in life? And if so, what sort of skills from that opportunity did you take away?
I don't think I actually picked up much of anything at the shipyards. It was something that was so different than women would ever do or had ever done. Hopefully they are able to do it now if they want to. But it was strictly new for a person like me that was living in the Depression times before that. And men, if there was a job, a man had it.
So I know that you're a Rosie the Riveter member of the Rosie the Riveter. So I know
I'm
that
sorry, I couldn't hear you.
That's okay. I know that you're a Rosie the Riveter member of the Rosie the Riveter Association. What is something that you're looking forward to being a member of that organization?
Yes, I enjoy knowing that I can be in it, and we hope to get to some of the large meetings. We had one planned, but it failed because of COVID. But I enjoy reading the newsletter.
Why is it important for you to be part of that organization?
Well, I guess just the idea of companionship, being with somebody that kind of knows what it was like at that time.
So during that time, women represented a large percentage of the workforce, whereas today they only represent a small percentage. It's like 30%. What advice would you give to younger generations of women who might be hesitant to try out a career like welding or some other trade dealing with the manufacturing sector?
I think women can do most anything they want to do. If they think that welding is something they'd like, it's fun because you're building something, you're making something. There's so many women going into every kind of a work, firemen and all kinds of things that we never had an opportunity to even think about doing. So yes, they can do whatever they want.
Well, before I let you go, Clarice, I just want to personally thank you for coming on to Mavens today to share your story. your experience is a part of our history, and it did open up doors and opportunities for women today, such as myself, in manufacturing. But before I let you go, I wanted to ask you, is there anything else that you would like to share with us today or discuss?
I really can't think of anything. I just know that I lived through it and enjoyed my life so far.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Clarice, for joining us on this episode of Mavens of Manufacturing. It was such a pleasure to have you. And I want to thank everyone else that joined us today as well.
Thank you for having me.
This has been another episode of Mavens of Manufacturing. Subscribe for more and make sure to tune in next time.